Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the Labor and Industry Committee to order. If we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, I would like to welcome everyone to this hearing of the House Labor and Industry Committee. This meeting is being recorded, so please silence your phones, turn off electronic devices, and I'll try to do the same. I think I was the only violator of this the last time, so mine is officially off. All right, I would ask that the secretary please call the roll.
Cox?
Here.
Bush? Ecker? Here. Fee? Here. Urban on leave. Keepers? Leave. Keller? Plunk? Here. McKenzie? Maloney? Here. Skorsky? Nelson? Ms. Carrick? Schemmel? Here. Walsh? Harkins?
Here.
Cephas? Donatucci? Here. Kruger? McNeil? Here. Miller? Mullery? Here. Nielsen?
Here.
Ravenstahl? Snyder? Here.
Thank you. All right. I call this hearing today to hear from stakeholders who have an interest in or a role in workforce development. It says it's on. All right, give me a moment.
Seem like none of them are on, Chairman. None of them are on.
Hello? All right, we're just going to have to wing it then.
Check, check. No, nothing.
If I need it, Chairman, I'll just come over and. That one.
All right. Is this any better? Not much at all.
Light was on.
The lights are on, but nobody's home.
Project.
We'll have to use our outside voices for this then. Anyway, I invited the people here who sit before us because they're stakeholders or they have an interest in workforce development. We want to hear what is working, what's not working, what you see as being beneficial, what you see as being problematic within the current workforce development system. And I'm not going to try to steer you in one direction or another. We just want to hear, again, like I said, what do you want to see improve? What is working that you'd like to see more of? And what role is the department playing or not playing that you'd like to see? So first we're going to hear from organizations that represent our job creators. Employers, we know that employers know what skills and attributes they need from their workers because they're the ones doing the hiring. So we need to hear from what they have to say about the workforce development system. Today with us we have, from left to right, we have Rebecca Euler, who's the Pennsylvania Legislative Director for the National Federation of Independent Business. We then have Alex Halper, Director of Government Affairs of the PA Chamber of Business and Industry, and Carl Marrera, Vice President of Government Affairs of the PA Manufacturers Association. Shannon Walker will be keeping our time. We've asked each individual who is presenting here in the panel to try to limit your comments and your inspirations to 5 minutes or so. Shannon will give us a 30-second signal, and What will that sound like today, Shannon? When you hear that, you have 30 seconds to wrap it up. I will do my best to corral you once that 30 seconds has expired. But I appreciate your willingness to come here today, and whoever would like to begin, we can start.
Thank you very much, Chairman Cox. I guess, is this what I use? No. Let me know if you can't hear me. Chairman Cox and Chairman Harkins and members of the committee, thank you very much for the invitation to be here and to participate in this discussion. My name is Alex Halper. I'm with the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. We're the statewide Chamber of Commerce. We have over 10,000 members throughout Pennsylvania in all regions, all counties, crossing all industry sectors and businesses of all sizes. Workforce development is a challenge that seems to permeate every sector of the economy, so we appreciate the attention to this critical matter from the committee at this early part of the session. Before coming to the hearing this morning, I was at the Rotunda where Governor Wolf is signing an executive order creating the Keystone Workforce Development Command Center. Our president, Gene Barr, is co-chairing that command center with a few others, including...
I only want to interrupt to let you know that I've been informed from our technical people that even though the speaker system and the microphone doesn't appear to be working in the room, it is working on the video stream system. So if you can act as if we're hearing it through here and go ahead and speak through your microphone with the light on, that'll apparently help those who are listening online.
Okay, happy to do that. Not at all. Gene Barr will be co-chairing this the command center with a few others, including Rick Bloomingdale from the AFL-CIO, and it's certainly encouraging for the PA Chamber to see both your committee as well as the administration putting a lot of focus into this critical matter. Again, this early in the legislative session. Every year, the PA Chamber conducts an economic survey. We send surveys out to Pennsylvania employers, both chamber members as well as non-members, and ask a series of questions. One question we always ask is essentially what concerns you most as a business owner, as a company, and typically the responses rotate among a top three over the last 30 or so years that we've conducted this survey. Taxes, costs of health care, and the economy in general. Those have always been the top response until this past survey conducted last year in September and August and September, when the number one concern was workforce development and being able to find qualified job applicants to fill open positions. This issue, again, is something that is a top priority for the PA Chamber, and the responses from Pennsylvania employers really go on to demonstrate that. We also ask a series of questions in the survey, getting more specific on the workforce development. When asked for the most common problems experienced when interviewing and considering job applicants, the two most popular responses by far were lack of soft skills, which was 43% of respondents noted that as a top concern, and lack of hard skills was the second most important. So I'll come back to that in a moment, but clearly these two areas of a job applicant's qualifications are of top concern for Pennsylvania employers. We also conducted a more specific survey a couple years ago where we asked Pennsylvania employers, first we asked them how they're faring when it comes to addressing their own workforce needs. We then asked a series of questions related to employers' interaction with their local educational institutions, the extent to which they invest in job training, and other questions related to their own workforce development activities. And we saw a very clear correlation between employers that make an investment in job training and those that are more successful with their own workforce needs. We have really promoted that idea among our members that working with local school districts on curriculum development, engaging in mentoring programs, apprenticeship programs. This is not about being a good community, a member of your community, and it's not about community service, although that may be a good secondary benefit. This is what successful companies do, and that's why employers are really going to have to be at the forefront in addressing workforce challenges. We reached out to a number of employers in preparation for this hearing today, and there was a wide range of responses. You ask some businesses, how are the workforce development programs being administered and handled in your community? Some will say they're perfect, don't change a thing. Others say they have not helped us at all. And that's what can be a challenge when it comes to public policy is when it comes down to it, it's often the individuals who are administering the programs and how successfully they coordinate within their communities that really make a big difference. I'd also want to note, as it relates to the soft skills issue, what employers will tell us they are interested in investing more in job training, working with WIBs, working with educational institutions, and investing more. What they feel they may not be qualified to do, though, is teach employees and job applicants what they consider to be fundamental, prerequisite skills for a job, showing up on time, all the things that we've all heard about, working with others, taking direction. And that's why we also need public policy that helps encourage those skills, whether it's in the schools, whether it's encouraging job creation for the types of positions that high school and college students usually take, where they often learn these skills. That has to be part of the equation as well. I appreciate, again, the opportunity to be here and the latitude with the timing, and certainly happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Rebecca Euler with the Pennsylvania National Federation of Independent Business.
Chairman Cox, Chairman Harkins, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me here today to talk about the #1 concern among small business owners, finding qualified employees. My name is Rebecca Euler. I'm the legislative director for the Pennsylvania chapter of the National Federation of Independent Business. NFIB members represent small businesses in every industry and sector, all of whom are affected by workforce difficulties. In the most recent NFIB Small Business Economic Trends Report, 56% of small business owners reported hiring or trying to hire, and 88% of these firms reported few or no qualified applicants for the positions they were trying to fill. Like the Chamber's members, NFIB has been doing this poll for a long time, and taxes, healthcare costs, and regulations have always been near the top. This is just these past couple of years have been when finding qualified workers have popped up to the top of that survey as well. So we're kind of in the same boat. With the focus of today's hearing being on Pennsylvania's programs tied to the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, NFIB-PA surveyed its members on their interaction with Pennsylvania's current workforce programs. We found that most small businesses are not generally aware of the workforce programs that may be available to them in their areas. Some that have used them to find candidates did not find these candidates to be qualified for the jobs that they have. Many also noted that bringing trade schools back to high school would be most helpful, as would emphasizing that trade schools are a good alternative to college. Others suggested, like Alex just mentioned, that soft skills like focus, conscientiousness, customer service, dedication, and a good attitude are just as important as the hard skills for the employees they need. And these skills, they say, are particularly lacking today. We've heard in other forums about the complexity, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it today, of Pennsylvania's workforce development programs, in part complex because of federal funding requirements. We've also heard about programs like PA Smart, which provide solutions to specific problems more directly, but these programs must be funded by the state because they don't fit with federal mandates. Ultimately, we may find that the most effective workforce solutions for Pennsylvania do not follow federal dictates. Other states have recognized this and have requested and received waivers of federal requirements so that funds could be used in more carefully crafted state programs. Though I know PA has done this with smaller programs, perhaps it's time to consider that the best solution may require a more comprehensive federal waiver. A waiver would not require increased funding, but would instead direct existing state and federal taxpayer dollars to the programs that best fit Pennsylvania's most pressing needs. NFIB believes that the most effective workforce problems, especially those designed to target small businesses, must provide flexible and accessible solutions, not cookie-cutter mandates accompanied by mounds of paperwork and red tape. The most innovative solutions will likely not come from Washington, or even from Harrisburg for that matter, but from local problem solvers. Workforce programs that address the needs of small businesses would emphasize early exposure to important trade skills and on-the-job training through targeted apprenticeships and mentorships. Successful programs would provide flexible ways for trade schools and high schools to partner with local small businesses to ensure they are teaching job-ready skills. They can also offer incentives for small businesses to hire and train non-traditional employees, like individuals re-entering the workforce. But these programs must be flexible and cannot come with excessive application requirements or with administrative burdens that small businesses, most of which do not have an HR staff, would struggle to meet. We would also suggest that workforce readiness not neglect the critical soft skills that employers seek and that help workers earn and keep jobs that lead to even greater opportunities and higher wages. Thank you again for the chance to speak to the committee on behalf of Pennsylvania small businesses. I'd be happy to answer questions when we're done.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Carl Morera with the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association.
Thank you. Chairman Cox, Chairman Harkins, and esteemed members of the House Labor and Industry Committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify at this hearing on workforce development. My name is Carl Morera. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. And nationally, manufacturers are facing an alarming problem. Our workforce is aging and retiring, and there's a shortage of skilled hands to succeed them. And Pennsylvania is no exception to this problem. According to our sources at the Manufacturing Institute, in 2018, there were more than 71,000 manufacturing job openings in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. In the last 30 days, there have been just shy of 6,000 job openings in our sector in our state. Couple the current shortage with the fact that many companies have more than half of their current workforce within just a few years of retirement, and you consider this workforce gap problem a workforce gap crisis. The manufacturing industry and the workforce at large face an increasingly pressing problem, a glut of unfilled jobs due to a skills gap. According to a recent study by the Manufacturing Institute, 51% of manufacturers report difficulty in maintaining or increasing production levels to satisfy their growing customer demand. The challenge is systemic. In this 2018 study, and it remains one of the paramount publications on this topic, they came to 5 main conclusions. First, that the hardest jobs to fill are those that have the biggest impact on performance. Second, while they recognize the importance of recruiting and development of talent, many manufacturers depend on outdated approaches for finding the right people, developing their employee skills, and improving their performance. Third, computer skills, programming skills, digital skills, working with tools, and critical thinking are needed to be successful but are lacking in today's workforce. 4, the changing nature of manufacturing work is making it harder for talent to keep up. And 5, that the national skilled job shortage will result in 2.4 million vacant jobs within the next decade. The numbers speak for themselves. There are more manufacturing jobs available in Pennsylvania than there are qualified individuals in our state's education system that they are able to produce. In the past academic year, only 81.4% of seats available to high school students were utilized in career and technical education facilities, commonly known as CTEs. I have visited firsthand some of the finest manufacturing training institutions in the United States that just happen to be right here in our Commonwealth. On a recent visit to the Pennsylvania College of Technology in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, an instructor in the mechatronics lab in Williamsport told me that they had a job fair for their 2-year Associate of Applied Science degree students in the mechatronics department. In total, there were 479 job openings. They had 12 graduates. These are good-paying, family-sustaining, meaningful, collaborative, problem-solving, highly fulfilling jobs, and 467 of them will go unfilled on that day. When asked what the biggest challenges are in recruiting students, CTE directors and directors of associate and certificate programs have continuously stated that the perception of CTE education and a lack of manufacturing career opportunity awareness. And unfortunately, this is not an anomaly. Program after program and institution after institution of Pennsylvania's highest performing CTEs and higher education institutions focused on these types of programs say that their demand for graduates is staggeringly higher than students graduating from their institutions. In visiting with manufacturers throughout the Commonwealth, we often hear that they can't find hirers that are trainable. The soft skills of arriving on time, being engaged throughout the workday, basic manners, and even the ability to take and or pass a drug test are barriers to employment. One major reason for this is that the rate of young adults entering the workforce is rapidly declining. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 1978, the percentage of workforce ages 16 to 24, there's a typo in my testimony, it says 14, it should be 16 to 24, was 24.5%. In 2018, that same age demographic makes up only 12.5%. The reasons are complex, but it comes down to red tape and barriers into the workforce. Workforce development is a really difficult policy issue to tackle. We know that there's a problem. We know that there are hundreds, if not thousands of people, different firms, institutions, agencies, programs out there to mitigate it, but the problem still perpetuates. A concerted effort to analyze, streamline, and execute a 21st century workforce is desperately needed here in Pennsylvania. We echo, I was going to get into the block grant that our governor so desperately needs to request from the United States Department of Labor and the Employment and Training Administration. It's so desperately needed, but in order to do that, we have to streamline and reorganize our programs in Pennsylvania so that they are as efficient as possible. Otherwise, we will not get that federal waiver. So thank you to the committee for exploring this important topic, and as we realize this problem and begin to explore more meaningful, collaborative, and needed solutions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. It appears our microphones and our speakers are working in the room. I want to start with kind of a broader question. How responsive, and you've all kind of alluded to this, but how responsive do you think our current workforce development system is to the regional needs? We have the workforce investment boards around the state and so forth. Do you feel that there's a disconnect between what we're doing on the state level, if you will, versus what you're seeing happening on your local workforce investment board levels?
I would say, and I apologize, this is not a very helpful answer, but that it really varies tremendously around the state, which has left me with the impression that it may not necessarily be a glaring deficiency in state law or with any particular program, but really come down to how programs are administered, state programs are administered at the local level. And the individuals at various institutions, whether it's a workforce investment board or at local employers or school districts or other educational institutions. So I think the extent to which policy can require better coordination would be welcome, but that's not always something that can be regulated or mandated. It comes down to finding the right individuals to make that type of interaction possible.
Okay, thank you. That's consistent with what I've heard on the local level with my workforce investment board. We do have a requirement that a report be submitted on March 1st of this year, and this will be the first time it's being submitted since the introduction or since the passage of this legislation. So all the administrations since the passage have been errant in not filing it. So we're hopeful that report pulls together the local reports and gives us the ability to say, all right, what types of improvements can we see overall that will help? The information gathering is supposed to have occurred, but to date has not. So we're hopeful we'll get some information from that.
I would add, if I may, that I think the report will hopefully be informative and helpful, but it's going to be information from the program administrators. I think if input from other stakeholders on the ground, whether it's school districts or employers, can also be sought, I think that should absolutely be encouraged, if not required, in future reports.
Okay, I can't speak to all the reports, but I know the one coming out of the Greater Reading Workforce Investment Board, that area includes what you just described with stakeholder input. We're going to start with some questions from some of the members. We'll start with the minority chairman, Mr. Harkins.
Excuse me, I just wanted to thank you all for your testimony. It's spot on with what I'm hearing from the employers and school districts in my area. and we are trying to work on partnerships with everybody in my region. So, again, thank you for what you said.
All right, next we'll go to Representative Klunk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the panel for joining us today. So workforce development is a big issue in my community, and regionally what we've done, we're a manufacturing community. Our manufacturers came together, talked with our local school districts, and built a chamber pre-apprenticeship model, which is very unique across the state, and it seems to be working regionally in our area to make sure that our school district is properly training young people to fill the jobs that will be available in our local community now and into the future. So when you look at the data that you've received from your employers across the state, from NFIB, the small guys to, the bigger guys through the PMA and the chamber, what are you guys seeing regionally? We have the statewide data, but are we seeing anything regionally from a regional need? And kind of going back to the chairman's question about these workforce development boards developing, the needs and kind of the plan for that region. Is there anything that we can extrapolate from the data that you guys have of, is the Southeast need more soft skills? Does South Central need more manufacturing, welding, those types of skills? So then we can give that data back to the state and kind of work together in developing and using that data to develop local plans. So that's question number one. But then the skills gap is the other data that you've been able to gather. And is there a skills gap difference between those who are coming out of high school, college right now, that age group, versus maybe my generation that's in that 30 to 40s, where the skills workforce development was not a conversation when I was growing up. And what are we doing to capture the issues with the skills gap in that generation? Because there's a large number of people in my generation that are not, in my opinion, properly trained to take those jobs. We're helping with the younger people to fill that pipeline, but what are we doing with that middle age group? So what are you seeing? There's a lot of questions there.
I can start off. We do see a lot of reactions to problems regionally. Similar to what you're talking about in your region of kind of South Central Pennsylvania. There's a great program that I encourage committee members to look into up in Northeast Pennsylvania. It's called the YES program, the Your Employability Skills Program, run by the Northeast PA Manufacturers and Employers Association. A lot of that is focusing on soft skills because, as I said in my testimony, I might not have gotten to it. I had to cut some things out to make sure I was under 5 minutes. But a lot of manufacturers will pay for training for new hires. The problem is that they can't find folks that are trainable. Programs like the YES program, the Your Employability Skills, is engaged in creating that or instilling those soft skills. And then at the end of, and you can actually, the schools are making it, high schools are making it a part of the curriculum. You can actually go and do the YES program as a part of the school day. And then they also do have night school so that adults can earn the same certificate. That certificate is as good as gold in Northeast Pennsylvania. And in order to pass that program, there are different tests and benchmarks. And at the end of the program, each one of them has to pass a drug test. But that program is as good as gold to go to the local manufacturers to get a job. And then the manufacturers themselves are partnering, whether it be with a local WIB, whether that be with a union hall on getting those hard skills that are needed to perform the daily job. A lot of the hard skills can be learned. And Pennsylvania is not unique. And I really tried to allude to this in my testimony. We are not unique that this is a problem here in Pennsylvania. This is a national problem, very much a national problem. The one great thing about the Commonwealth stance on this is we have some of the best institutions, not just in the United States, but in the world for training future manufacturers. On our visit to Pennsylvania College of Technology in Williamsport, they have a whole department centered around continuing education and retraining that 30 to 45-year-old employee so that they can move up the ladder. But one of the issues is that we don't have anybody coming in on that bottom end. So we would love to see some of those folks advance through the different tiers of a manufacturing facility, but without folks coming, a pipeline coming in on that, on the entry level, there's no place that those folks can go because all the positions need to be filled. But with retirements, as I said in my testimony as well, with retirements coming right around the corner, we're facing a big problem. And I think that that's where a lot of that coordination can come into play. But as Rebecca said, there's so much red tape whenever federal funds are involved that if we could better coordinate amongst those programs, the YES program should be coordinating with some of those other programs like the WIBs and those types of things. And they very well might be, but because there's so much red tape, because everything is so siloed, and because everybody wants to hang on to that portion of the federal fund that is theirs, that's the incentive for them. They don't want to give up their slice of the pie because they're afraid that the funding is going to go along with it. And that's ultimately that's the root of the problem, follow the money.
I just have a couple of comments with regard to regional differences. I do think that some boards do a much better job, and I know they're required by law to have a majority of employers on their boards, and a lot of them do a much better job of bringing small employers into the mix. Others not so much, and I think that has more to do with the economy in the region and the makeup of the workforce and the employers in the region. So out of necessity, a lot of times smaller employers have to be pulled into the mix because they're the ones with the local jobs. But that said, to encourage more involvement with smaller businesses and smaller employers, I think it's helpful to, at the state level, to provide a certain amount of flexibility within these programs so that there's the ability to reach out to smaller employers and provide specifically what they need. With regard to the skills gap and maybe the generational differences, I would say we're hearing from our members that where they're trying to find employees, they tend to prefer hiring more experienced employees because they come ready-made with those soft skills that we've been talking about. And a lot of the younger employees we're hearing don't necessarily have the skills that make them easily trainable in the hard skills. So a lot of our employers are willing to train the hard skills, but they need, I believe like Alex said, they need them to come with a basic set of soft skills. And they're finding that those employees who have more experience tend to come with those soft skills ready-made.
Thank you. Next, we have Representative Nielsen.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your testimony today. I want to focus in on the soft skills because the hard skills, as you said, I was lucky. When I got out of school, I became an electrician, and I went through a state-approved apprenticeship program with the IBW, the top in the Commonwealth. I would say why I have the microphone. But the soft skills, so the soft skills, you're asking us to pay money and create programs with this funding to teach a kid how to be on time, how to be courteous. I mean, they're the soft skills that you're shaking your head no. However, all three is mentioned the soft skills in your testimony. And you talked about conscientious, dedication, and wanting the flexibility of these federal funds and our state funds to do this programming. I mean, that sounds like a parenting problem. I mean, I have 5 kids. 4 of my sons all work through high school. I have one, he's 13. I've been begging him to get a job for 2 years now. But I've given him that discipline at home. I mean, soft skills, of course, I look at the opportunities for kids now. My fast food chain up the street would much rather hire a 70-year-old person than a 15-year-old kid because, as you say, they're dependable. And I believe in my heart it's our parents and are letting the kids, we're giving it to them. And that's just my personal, I don't give it to mine, I make them earn it. So, but I don't see how we can address that kind of issues, those soft skills, how to address them. I mean, because it's something that we can't expend this money. That should be something from home, connection with schools and stuff like that, I believe, in my personal opinion. But I'd love to hear from you all and see how you think we should expend state dollars or federal dollars to give someone and teach someone how to be courteous. That's just insane to me.
with the requesting a waiver, it's not requesting any additional funds. The funds are already there. We just aren't able
Right,
to get.
but a waiver to give kid manners.
Sure.
That's not acceptable. I mean, I'll sign any kind of waiver for a kid to get the skills to turn a computer, to learn the programming, to go in that manufacturing.
I'm not disagreeing with
But
you at all.
to teach a kid how to focus.
Correct. And what I would say is if, in my testimony, in 1978, the percentage of the workforce that were ages 16 to 24 was 24.5%. Today, it's 12.5. And why?
So how do we fix that? That's where your organizations have to come in and say, hey, look, we want to give these kids, because I'm third generation electrician, my grandfather, my father, and my brother and my kid. I mean,
and that's what I'm trying to answer.
You have to bring those kids into those businesses as youths and partner with the high schools and stuff.
And the reason is because how much more bureaucratic red tape is there now as opposed to 1978?
It's the same working papers. I had them in 1978. I don't want to show my age, but you go to your high school, you get working papers, and I went to the bakery and worked at the bakery down the street, a factory bakery, where Stroman bread, where I made brownies. But it's the same thing. You have to, as businesses, community, you need to give them those opportunities in high school, and currently you're not. And I would venture to say, a great question to ask is, how many kids under 18 do you have within these? That's got to be where some of this stuff comes in. How many kids are you hiring through high schools and partnerships with your three organizations combined? I mean, because you're telling me it's 12%, and in 78 it was 24.
It is definitely lower, and to be clear, I completely agree with you. We would not propose a state government program to teach kids these soft skills. Generally speaking, you can imagine different places where a high school student would acquire these types of skills. Hopefully, it's at home. Hopefully, it's from their teachers. But probably the most effective place is for them to have an opportunity for employment when they're in high school or when they're in college or when they're at that age where those soft skills can be acquired. That's why we support a policy agenda that expands these types of lesser skilled jobs that are often where younger Pennsylvanians, younger Americans acquire those jobs. We want to make it as easy as possible for that bakery down the street or that restaurant. Think about a waiter or waitress interacting with a...
suggestion, I don't want to cut you off, but they're going to limit me on time. He's going to cut me off any second. Is there anything we can do, like a tax incentive to hire young kids or anything like that? I mean, are you looking into any programs like that?
No, it's more about what we would ask you to not do to make it harder for small businesses to expand, but don't want to get too off topic.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that after the...
You got it.
Thank you. Please set
Thank you. Our next question is from Representative McKenzie.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the panelists. I've worked with all of you. I know you do a great job on promoting workforce and economic development across the Commonwealth. So I just want to continue on this same topic, and maybe I'll start with Mr. Morera. He had brought up a couple different programs, the YES program, which I'm very familiar with. They do a great job. What's so cool about manufacturing, et cetera. So this is something that I've kind of struggled with for a long time, is there is all of this local activity going on it's fantastic, but do you think we want to try to scale those things statewide, or do you like the local approach that we're in right now where kind of things crop up organically and you see what works there?
And that's a great point, and a lot of these programs, the ones that I referenced, receive no state funds. I mean, the YES program gets 0 state dollars. But I think that, I mean, similar to that, our states are the experiment of our democracy. I think that at the local level, we have different experiments happening in workforce development that I think that there is some opportunity to scale up. I mean, if we see something working really, really well at the local level, and we think that, there might be an opportunity to plug that into a different part of the Commonwealth that's having some of the same issues, but it seems as though as Chairman Cox was saying, and Alex with the first question, with some of the surveys and some of the data and reports that are coming back, that we're not getting a full picture of exactly what's needed in different parts of the Commonwealth. And then you have to then assess what are the best programs in order to tackle those issues. I think that the creation of the command center that the governor is putting forward is going to help with some of that. The problem, if we get back to the issue of applying for the workforce grant with the U.S. Department of Labor, that command center is great, but it doesn't lessen any bureaucracy. All of the same, I mean, we still have the issue of, different programs being spread out among 6 different agencies, and I mean, how many dozens or hundreds of different programs within those. So when it comes to the issue of the waiver, the command center is a great start, but I mean, if we apply for a federal waiver and all that we really have is a command center and a streamlined approach to, or a centralized approach, but for all of our different layers of bureaucracy, that's not going to get the job done. So I think that by applying for, if we could consolidate some programs and apply for the waiver, I think that those federal funds could then be better utilized, and that might be able to then, we might be able to replicate some of those programs, like the YES program, the What's So Cool About Manufacturing program that's in your backyard. I mean, it's worth a shot. I mean, it seems that, kind of seems like a no-brainer, but then we get back to that, everybody's going to hold on to their slice of the pie, and nobody's going to want to give that up. So I think there is an opportunity to replicate some of those programs that are measurable, that do have best practice, and I think that with a waiver, we might be able to actually do that.
I don't know if either of the other panelists have a thought on that, the localization versus the statewide approach.
Yeah, I've heard too many examples, sort of as you described, of locally derived programs being successful, and I think a lot of that is because when you've helped in the creation and you've bought into it, there's ownership and there's perhaps a better chance for success. So I do think state programs should encourage and allow for local programs to succeed and be supported, but there has to be regular and transparent and objective measures to ensure that any invested dollars are being used efficiently. So kind of a trust but verify at the local level should be encouraged, but those successes should be able to be reported to you all, so you know you're investing those dollars wisely.
The only thing I would add, and I completely agree with both my panelists on everything they said so far, but the only thing I would add, one thing I think the state can do is to provide a best practices sort of sharing mechanism, because I would agree that local boards are probably best able to assess their needs and to specifically address those needs. The state has to provide flexibility to do that, and I think it also can assess the success of those programs through targeted performance measures that show how they're working, how they're succeeding, and then share the results statewide so that we can sort of develop a best practices that they can draw from.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from a question from Representative Donatucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, panel, for being here. Okay, so I talk to a lot of young people. I have 2 grown children, and the first thing I notice is so many people are not working in what they went to school for, which tells me that they're willing to try anything and everything else. I think a big part of the problem is personalization has been lost. You do so many applications online, and if your resume or that questionnaire does not hit those key and buzzwords, they get tossed. It's not like years ago, and I'm like Rep. Nielsen, a lot older, and we used to, pound the pavement, knock on doors, have an interview, and you know what? You maybe didn't have all the qualifications, but they said, hey, you know what? There's something about this kid I like, or there's something, this one has, can work with us. That's lost today, and I don't know how you get that back. I mean, there was actually a report one time where like 1,000 people tried to go for these jobs. I think they had 100 openings, and not one got through. So that's a big problem. Number 2, and this goes with the soft skills, how do you get the experience if you can't get hired? It's the classic catch-22. Oh, we are not experienced enough. Okay, well, how do I get the experience if you don't hire me? But then the big switch, I call it the bait and switch, is you go for a job where they're offering you like 40,000. You do the interview, they want you, and they say, well, you're going to start at 28. Well, if you have student loans and you've just completed all these courses, you have a problem. So I think that covered everything that I was thinking of. Where do we go from there? How do we change this?
Well, I think you outlined a number of key challenges, all of which should get attention from policymakers. You hit on a really key theme, though, I think, at the onset with awareness from students, high school students and even younger, and awareness from their parents and teachers and guidance counselors and that whole support structure on what the marketplace and what the economy will look like by the time they're graduating or a few years after they're graduating. We understand there will always be students who may not seek that data and may not follow that data on a particular career path, but that should at least be an informed decision. We started a website at the PA Chamber, starttheconversationhere.com, which is intended for students and parents to at least have the data that's available so that if your goal is to be employed in the next 4 to 5 years in your community, here are what employers are telling us will be the positions that they will have available, and here's how you get from A to B. These are the credentials that put you in the best position to apply for these jobs, so that if a student at that age has that goal for themselves, they know the most effective path possible to achieve the goal of employment once they're sort of at that age. But I think all the issues you mentioned are critically important.
And really quickly, too, that agreeing with Alex, I think one of the problems stems from the adults, quite honestly, and especially with the advice that students are getting from parents and from, quite honestly, from their high schools. We don't want to think of a student who does not seek a 4-year collegiate degree as a failure. But that's the stigma that we've put in our society, right, wrong, or indifferent. It is what it is. And I was actually at a manufacturing symposium. It's called ManuFest. It's in Montgomery County. And there were 2 tracks. There was a student track, and there was an adult and school employee track. When I had the students, we were talking about manufacturing careers, and I had all the students close their eyes and tell me, I said, envision that you're in a manufacturing facility. I'm not going to tell you what kind of manufacturing facility it is, just it's up to you. What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you feel? And what they said is that it felt cool, that they heard the humming of machines and buzzing, like humming from computers, that it smelled sterile. I had the parents and educators half hour later and did the same exercise with them, and it was dirty, dark, and dangerous. Modern manufacturing is not those things. And but those are the folks that are educating our young people and telling them what careers they should take, what they should study. And so many times, there's so many great programs available in our CTEs. We need to be able to let our students go and explore some of those. But so many times, school administrators are holding those students back from exploring some of those programs because they want the test scores to count for their high school. Come on. That's the problem. And it's not necessarily, some of these students want these careers. They want to succeed, but they're being told, quite honestly, that if they go into those fields, that they're a failure. And that's just the stigma that we've created.
Right. I've always said that not every child is destined to be a scholar. Sure. Some of them have magical hands. Some of them have such great insight. So thank you. Did you want to say something?
I totally agree. I think that exposure to trade skills in high school is critically important. I totally agree with what's been said here. The stigma attached to trade schools and trade skills is something that needs to change. And I wonder to what degree it's sort of Carl alluded to this. That the high schools are measuring rate of students that go to college as opposed to the rate of students that leave and get good paying jobs. So I think that might be part of it too. But I would also say that there are some successful programs. I would commend the governor for his PA Smart program, which actually funds apprenticeships, industrial partnerships, manufacturing partnerships with high schools, and education grants for high schools. And that's just the type of program I think we need to expand. Unfortunately, that, as we've sort of been discussing, those types of programs are not easy to fit into the federal funding boxes. So PA Smart, I believe, is all state funds. So to the extent that we can expand funding that's available for those programs by getting a waiver to the federal requirements, I think that would help.
Thank you. The only question you didn't answer was, how do you find out what those buzzwords are? But thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Representative Piskarik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the panel. A question that I've been getting from quite a few of my constituents right now is, and you had mentioned it earlier, was the drug testing. With cannabis legalization being something that's debated currently, a lot of the employers in my district are wondering right now basically how they're going to handle that if it were to happen, because they're struggling right now with quite a few are failing their test because of opioids, but a great number are failing because of cannabis specifically. I just wanted to see if the panel had something that would be able to kind of give a best practices or what your thoughts are moving forward if that's something that becomes a reality.
I can bet. We actually did a survey. This was back in 2012. It was it was before we really knew how bad the opioid crisis really was. It was kind of on the beginning of that. It was actually shortly after then Governor Corbett made the statement about one of the reasons that unemployment is high is because of the inability to pass a drug test. And we surveyed just in the manufacturing field. So, the manufacturing field, you have to, I would think that there's probably other sectors that are more impacted than others. I wouldn't necessarily think that manufacturing would be one of the highest. Here's the issue with data surrounding that and what we tried to capture. What we are estimating is that 1 in 3 new hires were actually impacted by the drug test, not because they failed, but because they don't show up for the drug test. The major issue is that oftentimes the drug test is a condition of employment. So you finish your interview on Thursday, they say, okay, you need to come back tomorrow, we're going to take your photo ID badge, you're going to do your drug test, and then you're going to start on Monday. They don't come back on Friday. They just disappear. And that's what we were trying to capture in our survey. When you look, it's only like 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 that actually fail the drug test, but the problem is those that don't come back. In looking at the legalization of marijuana, one of the issues for employers is the liability. If there's an accident on, a manufacturing facility, you've got bladed instruments, very hot temperatures, high voltage, and some really, really dangerous machines. For as much as manufacturing is not dark, dirty, and dangerous, there are some highly powered tools that these folks use. And if the workforce is not so, if there's an accident, the first thing that's going to happen is that employee is going to be drug tested. And if that drug test has failed, the employer is going to be liable. There's probably, it's going to be a real uphill climb for that firm to survive. So as we, talk about the legalization or the expanded legalization of drugs, that is something that we do definitely need to consider. That could be a whole nother hearing for another day, but that is something that we need to definitely consider.
Thank you. Did you have anyone else wanted to comment? Okay. Representative Dush.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, panel, for your frank discussions. I'm going to be frank as well. Ben Franklin was asked about how do you get people out of poverty, and his reply was make people uncomfortable in their poverty. Right now, I have high school teachers who are asking their students, what are you going to do when you graduate? Well, I'm going to be on welfare. I'm not uncomfortable on it. It's fine for me. This goes to the core of what your soft skills discussion had to deal with. These kids are very happy to be buried inside their electronic leashes. They're comfortable. They're not, as I've been around other countries around this world, where they have real abject poverty, not like what we call poverty here. We've kicked the fathers out of the home, and we've become a nation of enablers for these young people. And how do we go about trying to turn that tide? Have you guys heard of anything out there that is actually working towards that end? Anything targeting that?
I think it comes back to the focus in many cases when it comes to Pennsylvania's youth should be awareness and making sure that high school kids, middle school kids, even younger, are aware that in many cases in their communities are good paying jobs, and making sure there's a clear understanding of what requirements are necessary to apply for these positions and to put yourself in the best position to get hired. I do think that if you frame it in a way that is compelling to a high school kid, and if not, not necessarily the goal of, as Carl talked about, of a 4-year degree. Not that there's anything, that should absolutely be encouraged. But if you make the goal, do you want to be living in your parents' basement when you're 25 years old? I think you're going to have a lot of 16-year-olds saying, oh, absolutely not. How do I avoid that? Well, here are the positions, here are the types of industries that are likely to be hiring in the next 2 to 3 years when you graduate. Here's what you need to do in high school, and here are the credentials you need to earn after, post-secondary to apply for these jobs. And then we have to hope that that young Pennsylvanians follow that guidance and put themselves in the best position to succeed.
I would only add to that I think it's helpful to the extent we can provide opportunities for young people to get into the workplaces through mentorships, through apprenticeships, and to see that there is really a career there, and there are mentors who are there to help you understand what you need to do to succeed in that career. I think that also helps.
Well, I know in my hometown, there's a manufacturing company that they have manufacturing day, and they bring young kids in, and they're actually showing these kids what kind of really good paying jobs there are available. And the problem seems to be that in some cases we have school administrations trying to divert those kids away from it, or on the flip side, we've also got people, as I said, who are more than happy to be enablers. So we've got to try and figure a way to get motivation coming from both ends of the spectrum. Thank you.
Thank you. And for our last question, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the panel, I'm kind of following up on Representative Preskark's question about the incorporation of drugs. As you were mentioning, maybe the 1 in 3, because someone normally knows if they're going to be drug tested and they'll opt out. In your scenario of the post-injury drug testing is kind of it's a little bit different in that now people are trying to contain workers' compensation costs and damages. Let's say on a construction site or with the trades, there are preventative drug testing before they're able to go on. And in the area of workforce development, can you touch on your feeling or belief that either some element of drug testing or like consequences of being impaired on the job should be included as part of that workforce development? Because I don't think that we would want to pre-screen before you'd go in, because we would lose 30%. But to incorporate in the curriculum the consequence of being impaired on the job, whether you're a machinist or an iron worker, right now that isn't happening in workforce development programs. Can you talk on your forward look, across the broader spectrum, please?
Well, I would agree that sort of programming would be very helpful. Our members, like Carl's members, as he mentioned, do hear about it. They're concerned about it from a hiring standpoint, from a liability standpoint, and like you said, from workers' comp. They're really concerned about it, and I would agree. And to the extent that job training programs can work hand in hand with recovery programs, I don't think that's a bad idea, and I think that probably can be something that is, I believe the governor proposed a trial program in his budget along those lines, if I remember correctly, but I think that's something we should look at because we do have a large portion of the workforce that's been impacted, and it is affecting hiring.
No, I think you're hitting on a key point, and in my previous response to Representative Dush of making students aware of what will be required of them if they want to put themselves in a position of being employed and not living in their parents' basement. Absolutely, making sure they're aware that many employers do have this condition of employment of a clean drug test. We have gotten the same survey results and the same insight from Pennsylvania employers that failing to pass drug tests or not showing up once an applicant is made aware that there will be a drug test is a significant issue. So that should definitely be emphasized, whether it's at the guidance counselor level or teacher level. When you're talking about career readiness, part of that is the ability to pass a drug test.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank each of you for taking the time to come and share the concerns of what you're seeing. I'd ask, as I've mentioned to a number of you before, let this be the continuation of a dialogue on how we can better improve things and how we can push the departments and the various boards to be more responsive to the needs we have. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to ask our next panel to begin making their way to the table.
Closer up here. It's a pretty low seat.
Okay, on our second panel, joining us today, we have some of those who are responsible for the training programs that are being utilized in the various regions around the Commonwealth. And we also have a representative of the skilled construction trades. And we're going to hear from these groups today, or representatives from these groups today. We're going to look and ask you some of the same questions, and I'm hoping your testimony will provide some of the same information regarding the issues and gaps that we might be seeing in the workforce development system. Joining us today on my right is Nancy Dishnot, and you are the Executive Director of the Workforce Board Lehigh Valley. Also joining us, Eric Isoda, President and CEO of NEPIRC. I'll let you explain what that acronym stands for. And then Frank Siriani, who's President of the PA Building and Construction Trades Council. I would like to remind everybody to please limit your remarks, if at all possible, to 5 minutes. We've been able to keep on time through this first hour, and I'm optimistic we'll be able to do the same for the remaining hour. Shannon, again, will provide a signal to you, and you have 30 seconds. It'll sound a little something like this. All right. And so when you hear that, please begin wrapping up your comments, if you would not mind. So we're going to start with Ms. Dishnot, and if you could speak into the microphone. We do have both audio both on our system and here in the room. So thank you.
Thank you. So good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Nancy Dishnot, Executive Director of the Workforce Board Lehigh Valley, the third largest area in Pennsylvania. Here before you representing not only the Lehigh Valley workforce area, but also 21 other workforce directors involved in the Pennsylvania Workforce Development Association. Some are in the audience today. The association has provided text on the evolution of workforce boards and the federal Workforce and Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, that directs funding and implement workforce programs and services offered through a community implementation model that reflects local and regional economies called PA Career Link. It's your workforce system. It has local design and has local accountability of services and local procurement of the services that we provide in all of the counties. We are all in your districts, working with your staff, serving your constituents' workforce needs. PA CareerLink has grown from a program to a workforce system serving two main customers, the employer and job seekers, and it's backed by services through the Workforce Act, through the Bureau of Employment and Training, the Workforce Development Partnership, Wagner Pizer, Veterans Unemployment Compensation, services through the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, Department of Health and Services, Pennsylvania Department of Education, from literacy to college, and more and more and more. So thank you for supporting a workforce system with a menu of services that customers in each of our communities who are your constituents can access through a one-stop location to the extent we can afford it. Above all, we really understand that employers are our first customers, without a doubt. Without their jobs, there is no need for a workforce system clearinghouse, is there? Last year alone, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act allocation to Pennsylvania was $156,252,836.04. I just added the 4 cents. It really isn't there. That's a lot of money just for that program. So I've been asked to say what's working in workforce development in Pennsylvania. The fact that Pennsylvania has an unemployment rate of 4.2%, and the governor presented a budget focused on Pennsylvania's most valuable resource, and I quote, the people of Pennsylvania. The fact that we're all having relationships and building partnerships, and above all, trust with the employer base in our local communities through the alignment of economic development, workforce development, education, and the community stakeholders. What is working? The fact that Pennsylvania has 22 private sector-led workforce boards directing research and directing the resources to meet employer demand for high-priority training, for career pathways, for employability skills, credentialing. They are telling us what the skill gaps are. They are telling us where to train. And the fact that workforce services and research and talent development and training and employer engagement is happening in 67 counties in Pennsylvania in alignment with economic development. If economic development can tell us the direction we're going, we can have a workforce that's trained to go in that direction. We can work with education to say these are the skills and the attitudes you have to create in education and bring the community into it. It is a total square. We're a total square. The fact that your constituents have a place to go to remove barriers due to the braiding of resources to help those with the most barriers, such as veterans and dislocated workers and ex-offenders and people on public assistance with disabilities and the working poor. We have integrated PA CareerLink into a one-stop, holistic, customer-centric employment and training system in Pennsylvania where employers find workers and people find jobs and training and skills and connect with social services, including career seekers of all ages from all walks of life, including what we refer to as children of the basement. Our children who have not found the job that we feel is in line with the amount of money we spent on their education. We ask you to get them out of the basement. We need them in the workforce. There are many challenges, certainly, in our system. The association has provided you written testimony on a prevailing issue with the Department of Human Resources, and I respectfully request that you read that, and perhaps we have further comment on it at some other point, if not today. Another challenge is the strong economy and labor market presents a talent supply challenge for employers in wages and benefits and compensation packages that meet regional labor demand. The new challenge is employee churning. We're moving from job to job all the time because we want to upskill ourselves, and now's an opportunity to do that. I'm not done. Public transportation, childcare, and housing are challenging to us. And you know what? Pennsylvania needs a marketing plan, a full-blown marketing plan on the system that has been developed by the private sector in the state of Pennsylvania. So we need the governor on the horn saying what's happening in Pennsylvania all the time and that there is a system available for people to go to. I have a few suggestions for improvement. Less regulations and more flexibility. Improve public transportation and access so that job seekers can get to services and jobs. More innovative ways and resources to partner with childcare and housing. Statewide marketing plan. Increase communication and engagement on solutions regarding issues impacting Pennsylvania's workforce and its system delivery. The other idea is employers have become the trainer of choice. They're the trainer of choice. On-the-job training, working with the employer to train in manufacturing and other fields. Together with the Pennsylvania Department of Education, let's establish youth career link centers right in our high schools so that we can go in there with employers and talk to them about the future of workforce, the future of jobs, the pipeline, the career and education decisions they need to make, the pathways, employability skills, and financial aid to get to college or get through college or get to onto college. A closer working relationship with you, state officials and legislators pertaining to your constituents needing workforce development. And also please maintain local design and local accountability of local workforce systems in Pennsylvania's private sector led workforce board. You know what? Everybody wants to be in workforce development right now, right? Everyone wants to be the leader of workforce development. It's been here for many years. Pennsylvania has a very established system. I don't think everyone knows about it. And I think at this end, I'm not sure we all know about it correctly. So take a look at us again. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Eric Isoda, President and CEO.
Thank you.
NEPERC.
Thank you. By now, I should know better than to try to follow my good friend, Ms. Disnott. Good afternoon. My name is Eric Joseph Isoda, and I'm the President and CEO of the Northeastern PA Industrial Resource Center, better known by our acronym NEPERC, and current chairman of the statewide Industrial Resource Center. NEPERC is one of Pennsylvania's 7 industrial resource centers that collectively provide the Commonwealth's small and mid-sized manufacturers with the technical advisement that they need to hold their position as Pennsylvania's 2nd largest industry and continue to thrive well into the future. We cover an 11-county region of Northeastern and the northern tier of Pennsylvania, facilitating manufacturing growth and accelerating their adoption of new technologies and helping them continuously improve their people, their products, and their processes. My testimony has been filed with the committee. I'm going to abbreviate that for the sake of time. I'd like to begin by addressing why we should care about manufacturing in Pennsylvania and why this committee and the General Assembly should be concerned about the health of our industrial community. Data just released by the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance, EMSI Data Analytics, and the National Association of Manufacturers revealed the following facts about manufacturing in Pennsylvania. Manufacturing is our 3rd largest industry in terms of total employment and 2nd largest industry in terms of total compensation paid to Pennsylvania workers. Pennsylvania manufacturers currently employ over 565,000 full-time workers, accounting for nearly 11% of total private sector employment. In 2018 alone, the Commonwealth's 14,424 manufacturing firms infused over $43.8 billion into the Pennsylvania economy in the form of employee compensation alone, thus making it possible for those workers to buy homes, spend more at the local markets, enjoy the local entertainment venues, and further fuel their community economy. The average Pennsylvania manufacturing worker realizes over $79,000 in annual compensation, which includes not only their base pay, but their bonuses, their shift differentials, the benefits that their employer pays for them, and the contribution to their 401k or other retirement plan that their employer makes for them. The average 2018 Pennsylvania manufacturing wage was 13.2% higher than the overall Pennsylvania average wage last year. And manufacturing is Pennsylvania's 3rd largest industry in terms of gross state product, which stood at $88.3 billion last year and grows on an average of 5% per year. These statistics verify that manufacturing is critical to Pennsylvania's economy, its treasury, and the well-being of its citizens and its communities. So let's address now more specifically the subject of today's hearing, the importance of comprehensive solutions and innovative approaches to workforce development in Pennsylvania. As you'd expect, I'll frame my comments in the context of manufacturing, although I'm confident that much of what I'll say is also common across other industry sectors as well. We've heard from our previous speakers that workforce concerns are now the #1 concern of our manufacturers and our business community. I'll jump ahead to some statistics to prove that point. In 2010, an independent market research firm called the Forbes Marsh Group surveyed 950 small and mid-sized manufacturers in Pennsylvania. And at that time, back in 2010, 26.5%, so about a quarter of them, reported that, quote unquote, workforce attraction was among their top 3 business concerns. In 2014, that same firm went back and surveyed 500 small and mid-sized manufacturers. This time around, 40.5% of them reported workforce attraction as among their top 3 concerns. Now in 2018, again 4 years later, that same firm surveyed, using the same tool, 557 small and mid-sized manufacturers in Pennsylvania. This time, an astonishing 65.5% identified workforce attraction and retention as their primary concern. To put that in perspective, it ranked higher in concern than other business factors like access to capital, global trade, global competition, environmental concerns, and even finding new customers. So addressing the talent pipeline obviously is going to require a comprehensive approach, an approach that addresses manufacturers' short-term needs as well as their long-term concerns. One of the things that we haven't spoken about yet today, however, is where there is truly a gap in our workforce development and labor and industry policies. I'd like to suggest that that is in accelerating manufacturer adoption of new technologies, which we commonly call Industry 4.0. Now, larger companies have the budgets and the access to world-class and obviously higher-priced consultants, so they can embrace new technologies, which includes robotics, connected factories, and so forth. The linkage between that and workforce is that the future workforce expects these new technologies. They grew up with them. They grew up playing with them, engaging with them. They now look to new technologies in their cars and are making purchase decisions based upon not if there's a warranty or good fuel economy or the reliability ranking of the vehicle, but on if it will connect to their mobile device and if it offers free onboard Wi-Fi. We may laugh at that and shrug it off, but the workforce of the future expects these same technologies to be used in the workplace regardless of what industry in which they work. Smaller and mid-sized firms, however, don't often have the resources to implement these, so they continue to have that legacy opinion that we've heard before of, well, it's dirty, it's dark, it's dangerous. And in reality, many of them are modernized, but the small and mid-sized manufacturing firms can still use additional resources to implement new technologies so that when those future workforce arrive and go for that interview, they're not only worried about if I'm going to pass the drug test, but they're also saying, well, I really hope I do, because there's some really cool technologies going on in this manufacturing firm, and that's where I want to work. So as a policy change, I would suggest that we explore incentives for companies to implement new technologies so they could continue to move forward and be our Commonwealth's second largest provider of jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Frank Sirianni, President of the PA Building and Construction Trades Council.
I'm out of time before I even start.
You've only lost 6 out of your 5 minutes, so.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Minority Chairman, members of the committee, for allowing me to be here today. My name is Frank Sirianni. I'm the president of the Pennsylvania State Building Trades Council. And our council represents 16 regional councils and 95 local unions that have been involved in training and education of workers for over 100 years through 79 apprenticeship programs throughout the state of Pennsylvania. Out of all the apprentices in Pennsylvania, we train about 85% of all the apprentices currently, but that's changing as more programs are being started throughout the Commonwealth. We do that together with labor management cooperation. We have trust funds. We pay for all the training ourselves. When an apprentice is hired or gets into the program, they're automatically hired by a company. They have a job immediately. They have health care, and they're paying into their pension, so they become self-sufficient at a very early part of their career. And it's beneficial to them. The wages are extremely high compared to a lot of other wages in other industries. You may start out at about $60,000 a year as a first-year apprentice, and the operating engineers out in Local 66. Some of them may only be about $25, $30 an hour to start. I think that, in one sense, is something that draws people to an industry, is what they're getting paid an hour. And you have to realize that they start at 50% of the actual wage, so they know that over a period of time they're going to be getting increases to every 6 months or every year, depending on what their program is. But there were so many things mentioned here today, and I commend the committee on this hearing. And it's so important to our economy and to manufacturing and all the other industries. I agreed a lot with the chamber today, so I want everybody to know that. There may be a couple things I didn't agree with, like the waivers. I don't know about waivers. You have to look at how they are presented, because waivers mean somebody's getting a different condition than someone else, because not everybody gets the same waiver a lot of times. So we have to look at that. I commend the Workforce Development Board that's put together, and Representative McKenzie's on that board. He's been very active in that committee. It's a good committee, and we have people from all over working on that. The big issue has been brought up here several times, and it's awareness, job awareness. That is the big issue. All the children, even when I grew up, which was a long time ago, we were pushed to go to college. I went to high school and state college, so where do you go? You go to Penn State. That's what you do. Well, I was one of the guys that would walk up and the dog ate my report. So, where did I go? I went a different direction, and I ended up being a journeyman glazer. If you walk into the cafeteria area and you look up and you see all that glass, that's what I did for a living. I've worked up 33 stories in the weather like outside today, when it's been near zero, and also when it's been 95 degrees with a piece of glass that's probably as big as one of those windows behind you. So how do you draw people to those kind of jobs? It's difficult. But the pamphlet I gave you, and I'm going to make this real quick, has a lot of the statistics of our organization. It was put together by the Capital Area Labor Management Group. It was a study done on our apprenticeship programs. I'm very proud of them. They do a great job. We spend over $250 million a year in education and training of our members in the construction industry. We also provide the best workforce for our contractors that we can. When we sit down to interview apprentices, the joint team, the contractor and the union sit down and they interview together, and then they review those applications. We have to jump a lot of obstacles to get people into our apprenticeship programs. We have to advertise so many days in advance. We have to pull out a particular group of organizations. So it's a challenge for us to get people, but we do it. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of cooperation between labor and management. And any questions, I'll be happy to answer. I'll yield. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to point out, for the benefit of the members and others, a lot of the testimony of these individuals that's been condensed to 5 minutes, there's a lot more information that's found in the materials they brought. So I would encourage the members and those in the public who would like grab the materials and take a look at them. There's a lot of great information in there that perhaps delves into more depth. I'd like to start off with a question, I think perhaps more focused for Ms. Dishnot. The availability and accessibility of these types of programs, in speaking with my own local workforce investment board, and I call them in for I've spoken with them periodically, but I've called them in for a more recent update within the last couple of weeks. And one of the things that I feel like is occurring, at least within our workforce investment board, is possibly symptomatic and evidenced elsewhere, but our small businesses, I feel like the small business owners may feel somewhat of a disconnect from the Workforce Investment Board. And when I speak to the smaller businesses, what I'm hearing is, even if they were invited to serve on the Workforce Investment Board or participate, because of the very nature of a small business, they can't step away from their business for, to drive a half hour, spend an hour or two, and then, they're operating a business. And so the challenges of just getting somebody like that to the table is often problematic. But I have found our Workforce Investment Board is utilizing input from some of those smaller employers. But one of the things we did here this morning was that the awareness of a lot of these workforce development programs, whether it be a local initiative or a statewide thing, I've pointed local employers to various programs as a state rep. I'm trying to do what you recommended even before you recommended it, and that is to be a liaison to my local employers, knowing that my constituents benefit from knowing about those things. Is there something that you're seeing within Lehigh Valley that is particularly useful, or is it an area you feel you can improve on? Where can we go with that to better serve our small business community, which we're hearing on a few different levels is kind of being left out?
I understand. And Lehigh Valley certainly is a large community of small employers, between 1 and 9 employees. Actually, now we're getting a lot of warehouses in, but what we did was literally hired the Chamber of Commerce to serve as our intermediary. So they are in the forward front position in the Lehigh Valley because they have over 5,000 members, and a lot of them are small members. So they are the intermediaries going out into the field to get the information from the employers. Not only just going one by one, but a lot of those small employers will get together with the Small Business Development Center committee from the chamber. So they'll come to maybe a quarterly meetings or semi-monthly meetings, and that's where we go to them and get the information from them and take it back to the ones and to the board that can. And with that, what has happened by doing that is, for example, you talk about the kids in school and how do we get the employer into the school to make sure children understand where the skills are and what the jobs are. We came up with a whole booklet of employers willing to go into the classrooms and talk to the kids. So every time the chamber's out there talking to them about services the chamber offers, it's also workforce development services, services we ask. And then they sign them up for this book, and we go into the school districts and they talk to the kids. And not only that, the employers that are doing that, we started going in and we sent someone in to do a career pathway of that employer. So now we have this whole hundreds of employer career pathways that we give to the school districts, and the teachers are using them, and now so are the employers using them as a recruitment tool. So kind of all works together. But the Chamber of Commerce, without a doubt, our local Chamber of Commerce is fantastic with us. We're with them every single day.
Okay, and
let them be your vehicle.
Okay.
You know, because they can't. They're fixing a car.
Yeah, right, why reinvent the wheel? Certainly. And just a follow-up question. You're the local workforce investment board for Lehigh Valley. So did you, I'm assuming you put together a report that was then submitted to the state?
Yes.
Okay. Was the information you just described, connecting the chamber, was that sort of information included in the report that was submitted?
We were asked for 3 things. Well, I had 40.
Okay.
So I think I did talk about the chamber.
Okay.
Well, so it is a matter of.
I'm hopeful that other chambers like yours are going to send us their ideas, and we're going to find how we can connect all these dots. Thank you.
Biggest asset. They're the ones making the decisions on hiring people.
Right.
They're the ones giving us the ideas of what skill sets they mean. It has to come from them, not from us.
Fantastic. Representative Harkins, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. More a comment, maybe a question for Mr. Sirianni. Thank you all for your testimony. I know we had worked before on some of the things when I was involved with the caucus involving technical and trades, I'm sorry. In our area, up in Erie, though, we recently had an issue with the apprenticeship programs where the school district didn't even understand the concept. And I attended the school board meeting last week, and there were 4 or 5 people that approached me because I had the background on it and explained it to them. Now since have gotten the superintendent to agree to go with me to see some of the programs that are offered in the region. But how can we, in your opinion, break down that barrier and let people see what's available?
Well, I would extend an open invitation to the committee to attend or to tour any and all of our apprenticeship programs throughout the state. There's probably one in your backyard like you have. There's in Philly, they're in Harrisburg. I know that with just a phone call, you could get in and visit any of them. And we would be honored to have you show up and tour our facilities. Some legislators have already. In the past, we've had different labor committees in the Senate and education committees come to our facilities to look at them. That was an interesting issue for an educational facility to not want to have trained and educated people in apprenticeship programs as a preference on their projects. And the board voted to keep that policy, and I think that was a wise move forward for that board. And I think that your input really helped that, and I think that was a good thing for the Erie School District and for the community.
It was embarrassing to be there and hear these educated people talk as though they understood, and then at the end of the meeting, talking to 3 or 4 of them, and they had honestly admitted that they didn't know what it was about.
One thing we find, with our programs, and I'm very proud of them, and you probably noticed that, but when our members or apprentices come out of the program, they have no debt. It's paid for by us. We pay for it. Many of them get a college associate's degree or near that. We're seeing a lot of different people charging for training and getting grants at the same time. To me, that kind of slows the process down for a worker getting to the point where they're going to be employed. I would recommend that there's some kind of tracking device as to how many of these people get jobs after that entity gets a grant. And that's a fairly easy thing to do because everybody becomes part of the registry on unemployment or on workers' comp. So all you have to do is check that person. When they apply for an apprenticeship registration for the state, they give their social security number, so their social security number could be tracked, and you could track that person to see where they go, how much they make, and whether that was a successful program or not. And I think the success of the programs are important too, the final outcomes, to find out where the money is best being used and best being appropriated. So again, thank you for your interest in this. It's very important to our future as construction workers. We have 130,000 members. That's, it's important to us.
Thank you to all 3 of you for your testimony.
Yes. Comment. No, union apprenticeship programs are second to none. They're very structured, very good, an excellent direction for some people. But I think what's happened in Pennsylvania through our governor is we've kind of opened that apprenticeship door, not that to employers to do apprenticeship programs on the job and to modify the standard apprenticeship program from the Bureau of Apprenticeship and Training. So we're beginning to see, and it's a very tough sell many times to people, to individuals and to employers. So it's how we're phrasing it to people and how we're engaging them in it. We know if there's a strict, structured, this is the direction Harry and Mary want to go, we send them to a union apprenticeship program. That is the direction for them. But if they're not sure and they're not getting it all and they just want to learn on the job, there's other opportunities. I think the word apprenticeship is taking on a new tone in the state of Pennsylvania because we hope the governor has opened that door to have employers do it and lots of other people. So
that's a point well taken.
Another way. It's another way.
And I spoke with some of the media people up in my region that asked if they could go along with us to see what's offered, and somehow they could break down the barrier and relay to the public what's available. Very good point, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Nelson, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, board, for your testimony today. because workforce development is definitely a, a buzzword amongst the budget and government, in our endorsement of buzzwords usually creates some sort of financial incentives or government dollars going towards it. From the employer and the trade side, existing conduits already are in place for workforce developments and PA Career Links, and there's already pathways for dollars to get there. But it seems like the small employers that the chairman spoke about, the trades, and even the non-union construction how did they, in a non-administratively burdened way, benefit from those incentives? Because I'm concerned that I do see an increase in trade schools. I hear talk of even a charter trade school coming online after, so I'm a strong believer that the dollar should really get to the district or the people who are going to be working. How do some of these entities that are not connected with an existing conduit benefit in a, how do you see us helping the small employers and the trades and non-union construction trades, actually getting it done?
Do you want to answer that? That's a good question. First and foremost, there are a lot of non-union construction apprenticeship programs. Not nearly as many as well, actually there's more of them than there are of us, but the fact of the matter is each program should be followed and tracked to find out if they're working or if they're not working and how they have to change to make them work. It's only good for the employee and the employer. The employer wants skilled people, and their program should provide that. If they're not providing that, if they're just using apprenticeship programs for low-wage workers, then it's a failure. Because people that don't graduate from the program, they go somewhere else, and then there's a problem. I think that, there are good programs across the board, and there are some programs that need revamped. As far as manufacturing goes, that's a tough one because so much manufacturing left Pennsylvania for years, and now it's coming back, so now you have to try to satisfy that need. But you have to look at the age group that was involved in that when that transformation came. They went to work every day so their kids could go to college. And they went to work every day and then lost their job in manufacturing because a plant closed down. So now you have this stigma that hangs over it. And there's good manufacturing now. I mean, a lot of good manufacturing to do. So it was said earlier by the chamber, we need education to parents, we need education to students, and to teachers to let people know those jobs are good paying jobs and they're out there. If we don't break that, we're going to end up having this conversation for a lot of years.
As a follow-on, I think if your question was how do companies access all the resources that are out there, because there are many resources that are out there, and our manufacturers access them as aggressively as they can as a way to reduce their at least initial hiring and startup costs for a new employee. So they'll look to WEDNET, which is a great program that provides some guaranteed free training for incumbent workers. Our local Workforce Investment Board offers a program that your first 6 months, if you hire out of a particular class, you would get a 6-month 50% refund of their wages. And there's also some federal programs that'll pay same if you hire out of the veteran community. What they really need, in my opinion, is someone to help them navigate through all of those, because as we had heard before, some of the red tape does become a barrier, and a manufacturer that needs to get the product out the door will quickly throw his or her hands up and say, this is getting to be a little bit of a challenge for me to fill out a lot of these forms and to qualify for a lot of these programs. Over time, I feel that organizations have either become employee-focused or employer-focused. And it's just a matter of who they focus on. Do they focus on the workforce, or do they focus on the employers that are in need of that workforce? And slowly over time, we've seen those organizations come much closer together. But if a liaison is to exist within that that little world. I think we need to make sure that it's an organization or organizations that are connected to the employers that can sit with them and say, let us be your liaison to all the programs that are out there. We can navigate this paperwork for you. We probably already have access to a lot of the information that you need to put on these forms anyway, in terms of the type of individual that you paid, what their wages are, what their benefits are, and so forth. So we have access to that by virtue of our relationship with you. Let us pursue those for you so you can get the maximum access to the programs that are out there. And then let's talk about individual training accounts or ITAs for these individuals through the Workforce Investment Board and get this person on the right path, but do it in the context of what's right for your company.
Thank you. Representative Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, panelists. Question I have, and for all of you actually, is I agree with you on the issue of that what we have done is a disservice, I think, to students for quite a generation of every student has to go to college. And a lot of that's driven by the school assessment and scoring, right? They get so many points for the number of kids going to higher education or however that's worked into their equations. And so that drives a lot of it. So so the counselors or the educators are not pushing students into or promoting the career and tech skills. Have any of you, in any of your capacities, met with the Department of Education to try to realign any of that scoring or evaluations on the school? Because that's a huge gap that's there, and there are just different skill sets for every individual. It's not this one-size-fits-all, which drives me crazy.
The Department of Education is working with the Workforce Development Board, and the secretary attends the meetings, and there has been a lot of conversation on the youth committee as to how to connect those dots and fill in the voids through that. But it's the awareness issue is a big one.
Yeah, specifically, I would say, though, and I agree, I think they're doing a lot of different things, and you know, our response to a lot of this is throw more money at it. Let's, you know, put more money into the career and tech, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but some of it I think is realigning those funding. So, and I think that scoring, have any of you addressed the scoring or assessments, evaluations of the schools based on, you know, their career choices?
So we serve on that to make sure workforce development issues are embedded into that. Because and everything we do, we align with the career and technical education standards to make sure they can use it. So then we present it to schools, they can use it, and we try to be the resource for them for all the things they have to do aside from teach the children. Something just happened, and we're just like stunned that it happened. We created an employer with our Chamber of Commerce, an employability skills curriculum. You know how hard it is to get something changed in a school district or embedded. It's very difficult. So we've been working with our Allentown School District, and we have this whole employability skills curriculum we had done through a grant from the governor's office, and we gave it to every single school district in the Lehigh Valley. Here it is, written by employers with us about what they require as far as the soft skills are concerned. Not only that, the lesson plans we wrote with them so that the teachers could just take them and use them. So we have lots of school districts using different models of it, you know, parts of it. Because it's hard to embed an entire curriculum into a school district. But we have one that's doing it. They actually, curriculum coordinators are embedding it into the school system. That's unbelievable. That's integration of workforce development into education. We drive our educators nuts, but we also realize that we can't expect them to do everything. We have to give them the product if they're going to use it. So much that we're working with the colleges to say, maybe we need to look at what a teacher needs to learn to be a teacher. And maybe some of that has to change. Do you know what I mean? Because we can't have a ratio of 500 to 1 guidance counselors and expect them all to come out to be manufacturers or to go into an apprenticeship program or to understand where the jobs are, what are the skills, what are the educational requirements. We have to be there in workforce development to work with them, which is one reason why we need to be in the school districts. We need to make sure that pipeline is coming out. Representative McKenzie works with us all the time. He's been in the school districts time and time again with us to say, here's what we need to do. We go into the classrooms and teach. We go in there and help them. We have employers that marry up with the school district to kind of do it. I think it's our role to do that. So there's a lot happening, and if you ever want to report on what's happening across Pennsylvania school districts, I'll let you know.
As Nancy was suggesting, I believe that the IRCs as a whole have been more effective in dealing with the individual school at the individual school level. And they will engage. I'm not saying that the need for test scores and need for college placement is not a motivator for many schools that are out there. And as someone in high school, I can tell you that they certainly are a motivator in our particular school district. That having been said, there is receptivity to meeting with organizations to talk to them about some of the programs we've heard here today. The Your Employability Skills Program, the What's So Cool About Manufacturing program, the Explore the New Manufacturing program. They do adopt those programs when they have room for them in their budgets and when there is a faculty member who is willing to adopt them. And the Educator in the Workplace programs do help make that conversion to a faculty member that maybe was kind of on the fence and not really sure as if he or she wanted to champion that program. When you get out into the manufacturing environment and learn about some of the great jobs that are out there, they do become somewhat of an advocate for the program. They champion it within their schools, and the next thing you know, you have over 200 schools participating in a video contest about what's cool about manufacturing statewide in over 50 counties, as well as more adoption of the YES program and other programs as well. So we haven't seen that the need for test scoring or placements or what have you is a barrier. We know anecdotally that it is, but so far no one has said to us, well, I'm not going to champion this program just because it's a detraction from another goal that our school has.
Thank you. Representative Dush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nancy, you'd mentioned about the unemployment rate. I think that's the U3 index. Do you have any, I've been trying to find it, but for Pennsylvania, do you know what the U6 is for the people who have dropped off the rolls? And the point I'm trying to actually get to is to, the number may not be as important as, are you seeing people who had dropped off the rolls and were subsequently off the U3? Are you starting to see those folks coming back?
Yes, absolutely. There are 16,412 people unemployed in Lehigh Valley, and we know almost every single one of them. And that's our role, to make sure we know where they're at, who they are, how we can get to them, what service we can provide for them. We have a we have a large group of individuals that look like you. They look like us. That's who's unemployed, because they had good jobs and they lost those jobs, and now all of a sudden they're sitting in our big auditorium talking to each other and trying to find out what their next step is, because they don't want to go back to work not earning the salaries they left. So it's a struggle for them. It's a struggle for them and the benefits they left. So that's a very large group of unemployed population in the Lehigh Valley. Certainly the people that are collecting welfare. You know, we had fought hard to get the welfare department moved into our workforce system so that we can see them every day and lock the doors, and before they get the check, they have to walk through the workforce system. So we're trying to do everything we can to make sure that we're decreasing the number of people collecting welfare payments. Do you know what I mean? So there's lots of things like that going on.
I do exactly know what you mean, and I'm actually, that cohort that was part of those who dropped off, but then there's also those that straight out of high school never bothered to even try getting into work. So that obviously, with the way you've got it set up, you're getting eyes on even that cohort of people that...
Absolutely. They don't fit into any program. They just fit into the workforce system. And that's the beauty of Pennsylvania having one. Everyone's welcome. Your children are welcome. We'll help them find a job too.
That's excellent.
There's a new definition of needing.
And if I may, Chairman, Frank, you had mentioned about the training and keeping track of the dollars, and you and I both know we're both on the same page on this. Your you forgot to mention something I think is very important with your program is that you're actually paying these people rather than taking money. You're actually paying people to be on these programs.
That's correct. They have a job, and they're getting paid every week, and they have no debt when they're done. So,
And that's one of the best returns on the dollar. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll end with Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I know we only have a couple minutes left, so I'll try to breeze through everything. First thing I would like to do, if you'll allow me, is just to highlight legislation that I just introduced today, Career Bound. It's something that has been introduced the past 3 sessions, and it passes through the House, and then it always becomes a budget issue because it has tax credits tied to it. So we took out the tax credit portion and at the behest of the governor's office, but it does hit on exactly what this panel, Mr. Siriani mentioned it a number of times, other panelists have mentioned it in the first session, is about career awareness. So we do have something that we're looking to put forward to address that issue and raise awareness amongst our middle school and high school students. So I know you've committed to taking that up, so hopefully we'll get to that soon. I do want to just say thank you to Mr. Osoda for your work at the IRCs. You guys do a great job, so thank you. And I do have questions for the other 2 panelists very quickly. So Ms. Dishnot, thank you for everything you do in the Lehigh Valley. Incredible job, and I think it was showcased here nicely today, and the rest of the state gets to hear from you directly about the great work you do. So on that connection, you've connected a lot of the dots, which I think a lot of other workforce boards can do a better job of. So specifically with the chamber, what is the financial relationship? Because having them as the intermediary makes a lot of sense. So how did you do that, or what resources do you use to do that?
I literally hired.
Ms. Dishnot, could you use a microphone for the benefit of our online listeners?
All right, sorry.
No problem.
Literally hired Michelle. So I hired one of their staff people. They work part-time for me, and they work part-time for the Chamber of Commerce.
And so just so that other individuals and other workforce boards can know and take that back to theirs, what dollars specifically are you using? Because there are so many restrictions around workforce dollars. So which workforce dollars are you able to use for that?
Right. I'm using WIO dollars.
Okay.
Yes,
Great.
absolutely.
Okay.
It's a staff position.
Yep.
So we're kind of I'm trying to do that a lot with a lot of positions, like we're working with our planning commission because we're so data-driven. We're going to share a staff person with our planning commission. They have the federal data, we have the state data. So how can we, make this a better system by, integrating with the partners? All of us we have like 83 community-based organizations, and they all have bricks and mortar. How can we get rid of that and say, let's look at another way to do business?
That's fantastic. I mean, I think that connection needs to be made for all workforce boards. So hopefully we can have that as a best practice that we can communicate to other workforce boards about how they can do that. You mentioned 339 plans.
Yes.
What's your take? I've heard kind of differing opinions on the effectiveness or usefulness of the current 339 structure in state law. Do you think it works as it is intended if you have the right input?
At least it's a structure.
Okay.
And what it's done is because we just bullied our way in, and I don't mean that negatively at all with education. We did. Do you know what I'm saying? Because we're always in a school district and trying to help them out and do something. Our whole youth director is very engaged in all our school districts. So we volunteered to be on their 339 plan to do some homework for them. And anyone that's going to do homework for school districts certainly is an asset. So we became an asset. They didn't even know we were that much of an asset, but we're a big asset. So whether the Department of Ed is going to really follow them, we don't know. But, it's working for us. It's working for the school district that they're now coming to our business education partnership meetings. They're talking more to us about workforce development. They're going to have job fairs at the school districts. We have them at our workforce center. So it's making conversation happen, and it's making us do things with the school districts. We have career linking academies where we go in and work with the kids in some of the poorer districts to kind of show them some ways to be science, technology, and engineering majors. Do you know what I mean? To what they can be. Because we talk all the time about manufacturing and construction and all these things, but it's very difficult when you're in a workforce system. Not everyone wants to be what you want them to be. So we always have to keep that in mind, that everyone wants to be what they want to be. We can show them the way of where work is going to be, but to be honest with you, a lot of the children in school, we don't even know what those jobs are going to be yet. So we have to make sure they're smart and they're educated and they have the intellectual ability to think and do critical thinking and to do mathematics so that they can do manufacturing in a different way because it's going to look different. And the same thing with the apprenticeship programs. That's a skill. So we need to be smarter.
Great. Well, so on that point, I think it seems like you've done an effective job of utilizing the 339 plans.
Yes.
I've heard a lot of discussion about good and bad, about the current structure, and even talked to the Secretary of Education about it. So we can talk and follow up afterwards, but it might be a good thing for you to be in touch with the Secretary of Education to talk to them about how you're actually making it work effectively, and maybe if there are needs, items to be changed for the state, how that would fit into the model that you've already created. Second thing I'll follow up on, and we don't need to discuss today, but I know it's a big issue, is the proposed realignment of DHS dollars for the EARN program and TANF funding that goes to EARN. I know that's a big part of your budget and workforce budgets across the state. So I do think the committee definitely needs to take that up as an issue with the administration. So I'll end there for you. I did want to touch on Mr. Sirianni brought up a couple things, so I have two specific questions for you. First is, we heard from the Manufacturers Resource Center about the lack of capacity for the demand for skilled trades. Do you feel that the capacity you have at your current apprenticeship programs across the state is meeting the demand that you see, or do you need a physical expansion of more slots available?
Well, that's an interesting question because that's been a topic of discussion for quite some time. And the construction industry is cyclical. So I'm sorry. We know that the construction industry goes up and down, and 2008 was 9 and 10 were terrible for construction, so there was a glut of construction workers. During that time, apprenticeship registrations was down as well. Even with our ratios of apprentices to journey people right now, we're not at full capacity, and most of the people who have apprenticeship programs are not to full capacity. So we keep taking people in as we need them. We've been able to supply all our contractors, which is around 2,500 to 2,800 contractors throughout the Commonwealth. We've been able to supply them very well. And we have big projects like the cracker plant out in Beaver County where they're going to need 2,000 apprentices on that job and close to 6,000 workers. So we get a call on a project like that, and we supply the people for it. We allocate people through our apprenticeship programs. We are involved in a pre-apprenticeship program out there with the local community and school district. So I think we're on the right course as we are, and everybody is watching the market, watching the building as it increases throughout the Commonwealth. But so far, it's been adequate, and we do have an aging workforce in construction, as most of the other industries have. So we're continuously trying to bring more people in. We do attend job fairs. We have Apprenticeship Awareness Day here in the Capitol, and we do advertise to all the groups throughout all the communities when we have openings. But as I said, I don't think any of us are at full capacity right now.
Okay, great. Final question I have is related to workforce and the wages that are paid in the workforce. Something I've heard about is a challenge specifically in your industry, in the construction industry, around the misclassification of workers and illegal employment as well, undercutting wages. Can you just speak to those two challenges that your industry faces and how that plays in?
Well, misclassification of a worker really hurts the public entity more than anyone, such as the school boards, the Department of General Services. It undermines the workers' comp fund. It undermines the unemployment fund because people are classified in a different position than they're actually working in. And once that happens, their pay scale's lower, so they're paying less taxes to the state. They would be classified as a different person on a prevailing wage project, which may be a different rate. None of those benefits go back to those entities. They just go to the person that misclassifies them, which is a lot of times the person who hired them. That is a problem. Some of it's been corrected on public projects, but it's still fairly rampant in the private sector throughout the Commonwealth. Undocumented workers have been addressed in the state under the Worker Misclassification Act. I believe part of that was addressing that too. I don't know, how we correct that as a problem in Pennsylvania. I don't think it's as big of a problem as Pennsylvania as in some of the southern states or our border states, because there's more policing through the Department of Labor and Industry on, what your classification is. Are you eligible to be on this project? Some of the misclassification has been in some of the apprenticeship programs where they will have a person work as in a different category outside their apprenticeship definition, and that becomes problematic too. So, I know there's been some talk about expanding that. I would be more than happy to sit down with anybody in the committee and talk about that.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and sounds
Thank
like
you.
we have a lot of work ahead of us on all those different topics, but thanks again for the terrific panelists today.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone again for attending, panelists as well as the members, and I say to you what I said to the first panel, please let this be the beginning of a conversation, and my door is always open. I know a lot of our members here as well are looking to hear from you,
Thank you.
as we tackle some of these tough issues.
Take you up on that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.